We are going to go through the actual grant proposal component, which is new. We went through everything except that. So we spent a lot of time in the grant application, went over the annual reports and the scholarships. And now we will go through actually the grant. I'm going to turn my camera off and talk to you on the big screen. So you're going to share your screen, or I'm sharing mine. So just one moment. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Okay, so we're going to be here in Salesforce, in FCSUA community, and the PowerPoint that we had this morning, we probably will drop that back in the chat room so that those of you who are new joining us, that you'll have that to follow along. And if you have any specific questions, but we are super excited about sharing this part of the FCSUA community because it's new and it'll actually complete all of what we currently have, for the most part, of what you do in documents. By the end of this academic year, everything connected to the grant components, not necessarily the proposal, which is what we'll talk about today, but the grant components will be an FCSUA community, and we'll be able to work on this virtual space and do some excellence accountability. And so I am on the dashboard right now, and we have a sample workshop grant account. And so I am going in there, Claudia and I will walk through some of the components, but this is particularly important for those of you who have not started on your grant renewal. We have about 5 or 6 of you who need to do that, the continuing grant. And then for those of you who are new and need to apply for a grant. So we'll walk through those. And again, if you have not logged into FCSUA, this is intended for you to log in and follow along with us so that you can have questions. And particularly if you're newer, it's been a while. So it is not meant for us to just talk alone, and we really want you to ask questions. So I'm going to go into this component, looking at the grant, as we look through the grant proposal component. And it's currently in the draft, and there will be some of you who will actually click no, because you do not have a continuing or current draft grant in the FCSU community. There are some of you who have a grant and your grant was done differently. And so we'll share where that is located in the FCSUA community. So we probably want to share that with you.
Yeah, we had actually a question about that, because we were having in some way the FPCTP grant proposals in Salesforce and the FCSUA community was based on Salesforce before, but everything was submitted through documents. So you were working on your documents outside of the community, and then you were submitting the documents to the community. So all that has changed. So if you were in that situation, your documents are still there. So when you go into the FPCTP grants tab, which is the one that Janice just clicked, you're going to see your current grant is there. But when you go through all the components of the grants, which are now forms, online forms, they're going to be empty, because what we received from you were documents. So don't be scared the fact that you open that grant proposal, because if you go to the latest tab where it says documents, all your documents are going to be there. So it's the different structure, but I think it's going to make it easier for everyone. So if you open to follow along and you don't see anything, it's because you submitted when we were doing templates and examples, but we're not doing everything in Salesforce, and I'm sorry, in the FCSUA community.
So they will go to the additional documents. Those who have existing grants will go into the additional documents, and there you'll be able to find it. And actually you have another place as well, because if they went into their account, they can see all of their documents under
Yes.
there. Yeah, we can review that later if someone wants to take a look at that. Okay, so if you are now, and hopefully again, logged in, and we want to remind you that each person, there's 2 licenses for each institution. Each person can have their own license. If you're using someone else's credentials to log in, you can have your own. And if you need a 3rd one, we've already gotten a request for a 3rd one, and we'll work on that so that you will be able to log in on your own. Those individuals will be able to log in on your own. Now, as you see the tabs in the grant, they are not necessarily the order in which you will work. But we do have the logic model. We will explain the order and the connection as we go through it. For most of you, you're going to start with the proposal first. You're going to go through starting with writing your narrative first. And so as you begin writing your narrative, and again, this is for those of you who are veterans, this is all of the information that you did in a Word document now is here. The structure is set up where you will choose whether or not you're going to do an initial or.
You have to open it, edit mode.
Oh, I click on it. Sorry. There you go. Kind of move my mouse. It just loves to move back. Okay. And so in here on the narrative, you will have an opportunity for those of you who are new, and we do have one institution that's in there waiting for our feedback. So that seemed to be helpful. The information that we've been sharing with them, you're going to take continuing for some of you, and we do have one program, one institution who's working on an application. You might decide to start on your initial grant proposal. So you'll get an opportunity to check initial or continuing if you already have one. And then the abstract is intended to give a brief, and we try to give you as much information as possible, just like the instructions for the RFP that was in the paper form, and we will include those instructions in here as well. But as you look at each one of the sections, you want to make sure that you have information included. Again, what you see is just text that we're putting up in here. It is not the gospel.
Right.
So don't look at these and take screenshots and say, this is an example, because they are not. It is just showing you that is text. And one of the things we like about this, as well as the grant proposal, is there's a edit tab, or what do we call it? A ruler that has edit components. Formatting components, things which we didn't always have, so it should be able to spell check and do other things. But this is intended to give a synopsis as you look at your abstract, a synopsis of what is entailed in the grant that will follow. And again, we try to provide as much information as possible, similar to what was in the Word document. But you are given kind of a snapshot why you're asking for a grant. We know that you're asking for a grant to support your program implementation, but now you're writing to us. The difference between the grant proposals and the applications is that the grant proposals lie between us and you, and that's it. As we look through, primarily Drew and I work through the grant proposals, and as we look through the proposals and have questions, we place comments, we work through the grant proposals until we are in agreement of all of the content. Once we are in agreement of all of the content that is in there, then we approve the grant, we pass it through our Office of Research. That Office of Research creates an award, and then the offices of research between the 2 institutions begin to talk, and we are out of it. So until we get to an agreement of the contents in there, we keep it, then our institutions keep it. And so that's what we're talking about, is all of the work that we do. If you, again, are, you'll notice that the components within each one are very similar. So whether it's initial or it's a continuing grant proposal, we ask the same thing. The difference is with our continuing grants, there are certain areas that we want to get evidence from work you've done before, similar to our program applications, as we mentioned before. So you've been working on a grant or implementing your program through grant funds for a year to 3 years, for some 3.5 years. What's the evidence that you need an additional grant to continue? And so that's what you're in, that framework of thinking about, how do I justify the great program that we currently have? And then I know, or our team knows, that we need additional resources. So how will we justify that? So when we look at the need, that is pretty explicit about thinking about, why is this program needed? Now, you'll find if you are a continuing program and have a grant, that your need is probably going to be pretty similar to what you had before. You want to think about, look at your previous grant proposal and build from that. Try not to start from scratch, because we have some really great grants out there. And so start with your initial grant, or even if you've had a continuing one a couple of times, look at that, because that's where Joe and I will look. We will go back to your last grant proposal to see the differences in what you have. So that means as you're writing, you want to think about updating your data. And I know that in this question number 2, if you're using the same data, unless it was last year, maybe, if you're using the same data that you had last year, then nothing has changed. But if you're referencing data sources, 9 times out of 10, maybe something has happened. When you're looking at your catchment area, you're thinking about, what do we have on statistics related to our particular geographical area? Your school district should have that. If you don't have it, DOE can have it. I know a lot of you referenced the national statistics information, but this is really taking a look at students with intellectual disabilities. Start digging for that information. If you don't already have it, and you didn't have it in your annual report, for those of you who are returning, take a look at that and begin writing down, gathering that information, so you can see what is the need for the students in your particular area. And I'll try to slow down and pause to see if you have any questions, and also think about, and Drew, if you have anything that you remember that we thought was something that we really need to look at, remind us too, so we do not miss anything. And we will certainly go through this again, but it's important that we take time to make sure everybody is pretty clear about what we're doing. You know that employment is pretty important to us, and how your program is designed, as well as the support you have. And so thinking about the resources in your current area, and again, the data that you have, what's the employment need as you start thinking about the employment need and the rate in which individuals with intellectual disabilities are being employed in your area. This is really about you and your area and Florida. And so as much as you can pinpoint that, the better it is when we are looking at your responses. And we do emphasize, as you're writing your responses, do as much as you can to write in full responses. So as we ask a question, this information will be converted into a document. We won't see the questions. We'll just have the answers. So it'll be a full proposal without the questions. We wanted to make sure that you didn't miss anything as you wrote your proposal. So that's why we have the grant questions written out separately. So make your responses complete, related to each one of the questions, and that will make it easier for you and I as we're looking through it and actually working through it. If you already have an approved program and or you're working on it, then you know how important it is to know that whatever you're designing, that there's a an opportunity or many opportunities for students with intellectual disabilities to become employed. What are those? What are those opportunities out there for students to go to work? And that makes your program that more valuable as you talked about the need and as they exit your program. Let's see, I think this is maybe in the initial mode. I am going to just back up to see whether you have a different question in the continuing mode. So I'm gonna back up a minute because just like with the application,
It might be
yeah,
some areas are
might be a
different
little
based on-
different. So this is
It is
continuing,
a bit different.
and I'm looking to see.
That is section 2.
That's, yeah.
About needs.
So when we look at number 7 on this, you notice it as what's the need for the grant? That is why the grant is, that is, and they're explaining it. But for continuing grants, describe why additional grant funds are needed to improve, enhance, expand, and or sustain. So we're really giving some keywords here. You are talking about why you need to continue, why you're asking for funds. We know it's a great program, but as you have thought about it and you have learned lessons and you have looked at some of the changes over time or needed changes. Like I know we work with one program and they said, you know, when this grant is over, we have a very different approach that we'll take the next time. We've already learned how we want to look at that. And so when they get in that continuing mode, they will rework how they can actually improve implementation of their program as they write their continuing grant. So that is something that on continuing grants will be asked. And I may just go back and forth between initial and continuing because there are just a couple of areas that are really different. Were you about to say something, Claudia, on that? I think that's it. Okay. Now, emphasis is the narrative is addressing everything in the entire proposal. So while you saw those tabs at the top that you will be completing separately, you're writing a narrative response and not necessarily duplicating, and you're not writing every single thing, but you're capturing the major information from the beginning of your grant through the completion of your grant over the years as you respond to these questions. So when you think about the goals and approaches, you are going to address and fill in goals and approaches in the logic model. And in that, we'll show how that connection goes back. So as you and I are looking at your proposals, we'll go and look at the narrative. Then we'll look at your logic model as an example. And they should be pretty much the same wording as far as what the goals are, pretty consistent, although you'll be working in one as a different type of form. So you also have your latest application, or even if you thought about your latest annual report and you thought about changes that need to occur. There is language in your application that still may be applicable to your grant. Again, as you look at information that you're completing here, it's not intended for you to duplicate the language, but to take some of the language, not recreate everything, but take some of the language and then think about what it is that you can do if this is a continuing grant. You'll notice here in the bold letters on use your institution's planning site in the Florida FCSUA's post-secondary program planning system, which all of you will be in beginning tomorrow, to identify specific focus areas. We go back to your online strategic planning tool, look at your plan to see what did you address. We had one of our renewal programs who also submitted a continuing grant, did a phenomenal job by adding their end of the year report. And so that was part of their grant renewal so that we can see the changes, as well as they lifted language from there to take us back to what they had accomplished or goals they had focused on and reflected on that, because all of those are connected. So this isn't something separate from the work you do in your strategic plan. It is connected. It's not separate from what you do with your application. It is connected. So where you can use information, we ask new and continuing grant proposals to include that information. So we hope that you will be able to do that, particularly those who are doing continuing this year, that you will be able to do that and look at the information you have, because you'll see there's very similar components. Okay. And so again, as you're working through it, the way that FCSUA is set up, you will be able to go back and forth to any one of the tabs as you begin working on them. And as you think about, generally speaking, this question number 2, your overall goals, you're going to have that in your logic model. You're going to address how you evaluate that again in your evaluation table. But generally speaking, what is it that you want to accomplish? You may find that it's very similar to what you wanted to do last time. And if that is it, you should have some, we want to continue, or what is it different that we did last time that you want? If you're new, generally speaking, some of your program goals might be included in what you wrote in your application if you have never submitted a grant for us, or are new joining us with an initial program. Again, this information is critically important to think about. You have your goals. How will those goals be implemented? What are some objectives that could really help you identify more fine-tuningly how you're going to meet the goal? And as we go through the logic model, those of you who are familiar with it, you remember that. But in this, as you look at your objectives to the goals, you got your broader goals, then you have how will we meet those goals with your objectives and activities that will actually make it happen. And again, as you look in your logic model, it's going to be more of a list and some narrative. This one is going to be a narrative that's capturing everything that you address in there. I want to stop to see if there's any questions before I go on. Okay. Now, number 4 is critically important. So number 4 asks you what evidence, just like we have bolded up in this goals and approaches section, how important it is for you to go back to the online strategic planning tool. Number 4, we found that as we work with many other programs, we had to go back and ask, what does the transition literature say? And that is looking at the latest evidence in publication journals, and in some cases in textbooks, as well as there may be website information. Where do you find evidence in the literature that supports the strategies that you say you will implement to meet the goals? And so that's what we're asking. What is in our literature that supports that? And while you are listed out again in the logic model, here you're going to write a narrative and think about the references that you use. If you can, again, have a most current, you may look back if you have an existing grant to update your reference information. Because again, it may still apply to what you're looking at if you're not making a lot of implementation changes. But please pay attention to number 4 and address that component. Now, as you're looking at number 5, this is for a continuing grant, most definitely. Describe improvements or enhancements you propose to make. What are they? And then really tell us what's different about what you've done before. And if it's not much difference, what is it that you want to emphasize that has been strong evidence that your program is working effectively, whether that's You are looking at the results of your students, they're employed, you're looking at the inclusion within your institution. They're fully involved in every component from policy to everything else. What is it about your grant that will help with implementation of your program? When you're looking for those who are doing a continuation, that is something you want us to see, something that really stands out about why this is a new grant that you're asking for support. That's even more important because as we go back, as Drew and I go back, and we look at the amount of funds you request, we will think if you're asking for funds above and beyond what you had before, and nothing has changed other than the cost of living and inflation, do you need $100,000 more this time around each year than you had in your previous grant? And there were minimal changes or results. Again, you have looking at the measures that you will find as you look at the activities you carry out. What are those short-term, intermediate, and long-term outcomes that you're looking for? And when we're saying that, think about over the 3 years. What are you looking at this year, maybe next year, and then the last year of your grant award? So that is the goals and approaches of the narrative, which ties very closely to the logic model. Anything that, let's see what might be emphasized, the major areas, because that's critically important. And I want to make sure we don't miss anything. I'm going to put it in the initial stage because we might have a few of you. This is just for demonstration purposes. What would look different if you are in the FCSJ community now and the choices that you have. So we had number 7 remains the same. If there's nothing, then I'll go on to the next one. Man, we must be doing a thorough job, or I'm talking funny and you don't know what I'm doing, or you are clicking along, and that's what I'm going to accept. You're clicking along and really following it in FCSUA, and it seems pretty clear. We do know that you've given us some very positive feedback, so I hope we're doing a good job. When we think about the personnel, institutional commitment, and collaborations. As I mentioned about the program application on sustainability, we are committed to supporting all of our programs. There isn't a way that we can think of that will make us not approve a grant. We will continue to work with you until we agree on your proposal for coming up with an official award. And an important part of that is looking at how much are you involved with your institution, or how much is the institution committed to your inclusion? Although they've assigned and approved for your program to be there, do they really understand that level of commitment? And so as we look at that and think about the people you will need, and then the resources that are already at your institution that you will use and can use, because everything you do will be parallel to what is in the institution. What are those things that will be in the grant that will be okay? Our lights have gone out because we're not moving. Thank you, Claudia. So this is an important part. We've not had many people who ask questions on the personnel. You've kind of thought about that. But for those programs who are spanking brand new, and you focus so much energy on your application and hadn't had a chance to think about your grant, just wanted to get that application approved, you really want to think about all of the resources that we may need, because that again is going to determine your budget. What is the capacity of our institution? And what do we need to make this a success for our students and for everyone involved with the program? So you think about who are the folks that you would need, and do emphasize their qualifications in being part of that. We've had a few proposals where this may have not been really fleshed out, that you mentioned or you identified personnel, but you really didn't flesh out their credentials and why they're important to be part of the grant. But this is where you lay out, we're going to need job coaches, we're going to need an evaluator, we're going to need additional director, whatever. Your ideas about what would we really need to make this work, knowing we do have a budget limit, but what would we use to make this work in a way that would make us proud of the success of implementation. This part, number 2, has the institution's governing board approve the program. That'll be easy for you, because unless you're just in the process of getting your application approved, you'll still need the governing board to approve it, which you will address in your program application. If you're continuing program, you'll have that information and you'll talk about the continuous need. They will need to, if your program is under renewal, reapprove that program. If it's a grant, your program is approved, but you can use the language you used in your application. When we ask about the institution's commitment to your program, it's what resources are they sharing? Are they sharing space? Are they allowing you to be part of enrollment services? Do they have a person in financial aid that's dedicated to work with you? Career advising is working with you. They're on your team. It's in this. Our institutions are huge. They have several components. How is your institution supporting the inclusion of your program as a long-term thread within the fabric of the institution? So this is where you might boast about the institution's commitment. And we're not just asking about funds, money. We're asking about what is it that the institution is providing to make sure the implementation of your program is a success. And with that, a lot of times, as you think about it, we do look at what other funds there might be, just as we ask in the program. Number 4, you have more than the institution who's going to support you. Like the concepts and systems domain in the online strategic planning tool. Outside of your institution, what are the connections that you have with the implementation? You're going to need employers. You're going to need other community agencies. We hope that you partnered up with Voc Rehab, with the DD Council, with whomever. What will your connections be? This is another place to brag, because you're going to reach out to those entities for recruitment purposes. You want everybody to know what family support groups do you have in place that can also share the word about it. And so as you think about it, take time to chew on, what does your current institution, what's that? Who do they recruit to? Are we parallel to that recruitment format? And is it just disability specific that we're looking, or we're spreading the word to the community at large, because that's how our message gets out. So think of whom you're recruiting or you're targeting for recruitment, and boast about that. I've already mentioned the parents, how you're getting connected with them. And that's an important component. We know that our students have parents and families supporting them, as all students, before they come into your program, during the time they're in your program, and even after they leave. They become alums. They are really proud of participating in the program. So how do you make those connections? I see that as a great bragging point. I mentioned VR, you have other networks. think about that concepts and systems domain. If you've addressed that at all in your online strategic planning tool, you're boasting and elaborating on that right here as you start thinking about how you're going to implement this program and get those folks to help you come in. Maybe you need individuals helping you with marketing and recruitment, which we saw actually, and we're happy to see as we saw some of the newer grants come out, because you really start thinking about how you can push that information out to others and get employers on board to say, hey, I wouldn't mind having one of your students join us. I see the emphasis on employment is following us as you start looking at 6, 7, and 8 even, and thinking about those transition councils. You all, for those of you who are current programs, you've been sending us your newsletters and sending us advertisement about how you are connecting with the transition councils in your local area. Those are going to they're going to share the word. We're hoping that through your implementation, students come out with even stronger transition plans, and they know and have identified for the post-secondary comprehensive transition programs on their summary of performance or transition plans as an option that they know they're going to, and have made that connection and are admitted before they actually leave their program. Your advisory boards are critically important, and I know I'm preaching to the choir. I don't have to say that over and over again, but if you don't have your advisory board learning and being your listening board, giving you suggestions of places to go to kind of help you with that recruitment and sustainability, and then you want to think about how to strengthen that area if you hadn't already done that. So that's a huge part of really the bulk of your narrative when we start thinking about that. And so that's the goals and approaches area. And if there's no questions about that, I'll collapse some of these so we can get through. Okay.
And that's one of the features to keep in mind, especially when you're writing your proposal, because it's a lot of information. So definitely, I would suggest to take advantage of collapsing the sections so you can navigate through it. And then we do have the same feature in the application, but I think it's even more helpful here in the grant proposal.
Yes, it's a lot, and seeing a lot on the screen and going back and forth. And so just like we will have a tab that's specifically performative and summative evaluation, but here, this is a write-up, a discussion about what you're going to actually put in that template, because in that template that we'll look at in a minute, you'll see it is a form. And so we want you to take time, again, to think about from the first year through completion, how will you look at measures each year in a formative way? And throughout that time, whatever is complete before that in a summative evaluation, what are those? But most definitely, as you look at the completion of your grant award, what will be the outcomes that you're looking at and you will evaluate over that period of time when we're thinking about 3 years and how you will address that? So again, we've broken out questions that will help you answer each and not miss each one of those questions, so that you can give the quality responses that you like. First, starting with your formative and asking the same questions again as we look at summative. What will you look at in small measures when you look at those short-term and intermediate goals and results and activities and products, and then more long-term summative, we're asking the same question. And so if you're there and you start thinking about it, what data, evidence, when you're looking at how well you're doing, what evidence will you collect? And where would that look at? Where would that look like? That, again, is another good reason to think about your online strategic planning tool, because as you're making your plan, And as you look at the examples in the planning tool, it gives you ideas, if you haven't thought of them already, of what are some examples of evidence we should collect or look at. Similarly, this is what we're asking for the grant proposal. And as you look at that, what are your data sources? Where are you finding? Well, it is best to have a variety of resources to collect your data other than just observations or looking at the student's summary of academic progress, satisfactory academic progress. What's in your institution that they use to show evidence that programs are working? Connect with your institutional assessment office and find out what is that that you use. Perhaps we can use some of that same data, and I don't understand why not. As you look at success of your program, and then how will you know whether or not you did well? As you look at it, analyze your data. What does it mean? As you look at your data results, how will you go through and evaluate whether it worked or didn't work? And so, or whether it's something you need to change and revisit, particularly when you think about your renewal time or continuing time. And of course, as you're looking at your ongoing assessment and thinking about how beneficial your data is, it is part of your plan, just as your strategic plan, part of your plan to help you stay on track so you don't miss anything. So that's when we look at the formative, it's in more increments. Summative is thinking about as you look at outcomes coming to an end, and at the end of your grant award, what are those same questions? How will you look at the end of the award period? What will you be happy with that gives you indication that you're doing what you needed to do? And you have the evidence of data to support the work that you thought you wanted to do. Very similar. So one is more formative and this one is more at the completion of your either outcomes have been met or of your award. No questions? No. Okay. And then the budget. Some of you might start there as you're dreaming about your personnel, that section on personnel commitment and collaborations. You might start there because you know that if you are thinking about the type of personnel you need, then you have to think about, are we going to have enough money? And I do want to say, keep in mind that we are looking at ranges of grants from $300,000 to $500,000 per year for up to 3 years. And so if you know you're working on you're thinking about a budget that might be $500,000 per year, then that helps you think about what can we afford the personnel and or the resources we think we need for the implementation. And then is what we're requesting adequate? Is it going to, and that's what Drew and I will look at, is that adequate enough for you to implement your program? In addition to what we found out in most of our grants, that institutional commitment has been phenomenal. And so the support of your institution, even though you may have 5 or 6 people, including your grant and or other resources that you need, technology and so forth, your institution contributes a lot. So you think about how adequate is what we are requesting is appropriate. And again, what we have in here is just text to let you know that we're filling in. Has nothing to do with accuracy. So please don't try to mimic any of it. And I don't think you will. But this is pretty much a, most of you might have a good paragraph or two as you, when you answer the questions that would summarize your response to this. So the questions are broken down to make sure those 1 or 2 paragraphs are wholesome enough to help you address all of what you believe about the budget.
And something that the few institutions that are already working with this new format, it's being helpful to them is they request a copy
Oh, yeah.
of the PDF that actually is the result of the entire process. So that's something that I actually want to mention. So even if you are if you're not ready to submit it, but you want to see how it's looking, or you want to share with someone else, just let us know, and I will just create a PDF out of the community, and I will send it to you, so you have an idea how all your answers are just keeping together in the narrative.
Yeah. I think that'd be helpful and very different from when you did it in the Word document, or those of you who did it. So if there's no questions from there, one thing I do want to mention is the commitment form will fill in institution information from whatever you have in your application, for whatever you have in your contacts. That is going to be an automatic fill in, and then the other information you will actually complete. And that's where the person who's responsible for being the financial administrator will know what to do in that area. So I'm going to go to the logic model. And this may be the order in which some of you wrote your previous grant. I'm not sure. But the logic model is a form, and we have suggestions here. Just as you see it on our strategic planning tool, there are suggestions or examples for you. And so as we look at program goals, we have some here that you may, again, use and or modify, as we said in our instructions, for your program. What I saw last year with programs who did continuing grants, they really kept some of these basic goals. However, they thought about what had happened over the last 3 years and put in some really strong, new, very different goals that would drive the implementation of the program in a much better way. And while keeping those 3 solid goals as unique to them and modified in their language, that made their program, is making their program tick really well during this cycle. So we were really pleased to see that.
And the fact that we are giving them 3 examples doesn't mean that that's the number that they have to enter. There's there they can go up to 5.
Yes.
So there is a limit, but you can go up to 5 goals when you're writing your proposal. So if you try to add a 6th goal, you're gonna get that red message that said that you are actually reached the limit.
So here's where you would click if you wanted to add another goal. And a screen will come out for you to put your information here about what your goal is. All of that will fill in because it'll be filling in the form. You'll notice that it connects to the domains in the online strategic planning tool. And so as you look at the implementation of your program, and as you're using the grant funds, what will your goals be if you have new ones, and where would they fall in the domains as you think about those? Again, looking at adding to, if it's a continuing program and continuing grant, adding to maybe continuing or enhancing some of the goals that you had, or for new programs, adding those 3, being good with those 3, or no more than 5, but you will have an opportunity to put 5 goals. As you look at inputs, on the inputs, what is currently in place? What is it that's at your institution that's solid, that you know that you're going to build on? These are the possibilities with your institution, as well as the support that we provide. Again, the information you see in here is just an example. And that's what you want to say. We're starting with this. So based on what we already have, this is going to give us a nice springboard as we look at our goals, our products, our activities, and our outcomes. And save that. Did I miss something or anything?
I want to mention there in the
Click on the
goal
goal.
sections.
Should I click on
First the actions.
Okay.
So they notice that you can, if there's something that you added at the beginning, if you think that, okay, this is not correct, I want to just delete that and start over. Maybe I reached the limit and I think this goal is not the one that I want to have in my proposal, and I want to add another one. You just definitely can go in and delete. And that that icon is also available. If you actually click on in one of the goals, it happens through the older components. So once you're going through the process of creating your logic model, which is writing what your activities are going to be, your outputs and your outcomes, you can delete those actions are there for you to delete if anything it's not accurate. You can delete and also edit.
And if any of you have had a chance to preview, which I mentioned again, the technical soundness pre-recorded session that we have in the YouTube channel in Hoover, in Hoover, you'll think about some of the comments that Alicia made about, as you think about your goals and your outputs, your activities, your products, they all will link back to how you're going to complete your goal. And as you look at person-centered planning, there's not there, you've thought about some of the product that will be used to actually as an outcome from what the work that you'll do is you do the person-centered approach. You can add on information related to that as your activity, but what will your product be? And I think with some of previous grant proposals, we wanted to clarify the difference between the product and the activity or the objective to kind of help you get there.
Yes, can you stay there for a
Yes,
second? And
okay.
Can you click on add products materials?
Yes.
So that is something that we realized that so when we're trying to work on this, we realized that in some cases some activities might lead to the same product and material. And that's something that we realized we don't want you to be entering things, duplicating or triplicating information because it's the same. Sometimes you have to develop or work on several things to arrive to the same product. So that's why you're seeing this function. If you are in that, if your logic model is in that situation and that's what you're thinking, so you can reuse those products and materials. So instead of adding a new one, you can select from the ones that you already created if it applies to your activity, and you don't have to repeat that information. So you don't have to type in. So that's definitely something I recommend that you take advantage of when you're working on the logic model specifically.
So we got that, cancel that. So to help you see, again, how that front page ends up looking, it has all of this information, similar to like when you did your program application and you talked about your credentials and the length of time. This pullout is all of that that then shows back under your goals, and they all tied together. So you have the goal, you have the activities, the products, then you're going to have your outcomes that relate to those to have it in a nice goal to activities to outcome level. And that's how you will look at your evaluation of how well everything worked out. So if there's no questions here, okay.
Yeah, something that is going to be at the end of each tab that you're seeing on the screen is a save. So make sure that when you're working on it, just before you move to the next one, you save so you keep your information. So that's critical.
Yeah. And in order to do the logic model, in order to do the evaluation component, the logic model must come first. If you click on the evaluation and you haven't done the logic model, you will not be able to complete it because they all tie together. And so when you've completed your logic model, now your goals, the way in which the products that you said that will be a part of that, from the activities that you do, you will be able to see, all right, did we produce this product? And then as you look at that and you've thought about your short-term, you think about your short-term, long-term, and intermediate goals, you will be able to look at how we're going to evaluate that, what evidence and data sources we use to make a decision about how we're going to analyze that data. So for each outcome, again, you will have what is the evidence to tell you you're doing okay as you move through each one of those goals. And they will already be broken out in the domains in which you chose and related to the online strategic planning tool, which of those domains it actually relates to. You'll have your evidence, you'll have your data sources that's going to help you find the information you need to monitor your progress. And as you go through each, whatever outcome that you have, as you go through each one of them, it's going to ask you those questions again. Okay, what is your evidence that you're going to? How will you know how well you're doing? And what will you use? What data sources will you use to kind of tell you about your progress and how well you're doing?
It is organized by the type of outcome. So it will, if you have, in this example, we have 2 goals. So we have short-term, intermediate, and long-term outcomes that belong to that goal. So it's gonna be the layout of the page is gonna be in that way. So it makes sense with based on what you worked on the logic model.
And again, as you're capturing and thinking about your big goals in your narrative, and you have your logic model information, which you may have already written in your narrative, then you have that to capture and summarize in the narrative part, because it'll be very different over in the evaluation and logic model part. And that is how your evaluation will be done. And so each year when you do your annual performance report, that too will tie back to your evaluation and pull the information to say, this is what you said you were going to measure, the data that you said you were going to use to research, how did it go? And that's similar to the current annual performance report that we now have. Pulling that same information, that too will be in here. Okay. Your budget. I think this is where we have the least trouble. So
It's not a spreadsheet anymore.
It's not a spreadsheet, most definitely, but it does all your calculations. And are they able to download this as an Excel file?
We can, upon the
Download
request,
it
we can, it compiles everything. So when when I said that it compiles as a PDF and we were describing the narrative, it also includes everything else that you've done for the other components. So if you have your logic model in and your evaluation and your budget, it creates documents that look similar to those templates that we use to provide for you to submit your proposal narrative. It follows the same structure. The only difference is that it's now an online version of all of those components. But yeah, it compiles in a table similarly, pretty much identical to what we were using in Excel before.
And if you need to see it, Claudia, give it to you.
Okay.
So you can see it. Yeah, that's how it's going. So you want to think about your project years. You know, how long will your project, this actual proposal is geared for? You have up to 1 to 3 years. Now, keep in mind, and in the PowerPoint, you have the funding cycle. That funding cycle hasn't changed. And depending on when your proposal is actually submitted and what you're targeting on your start date, some of you may have as much as 3.5 years, particularly if you're going to start in January. So you think about that. If you're starting in January or April, you're going to have a longer time. If you're starting in July, then you're going to be on a regular 1, 2, 3. 3 is the max, unless you're in one of those other ones. And so you put the grant start and end date, and we definitely check that to make sure you're okay. And if you're not doing 3 years, we ask why not, just to make sure. And I do that because we have so many new people who are going in and completing this information who are not part of the initial grant thinking or proposal. So I want to make sure you know that you have that range of time. You will get most of your numbers for personnel. All of this is going to come from your human resources and what your allowability to be. And this is like a spreadsheet, will calculate everything as you put the information in there. It's not going to, well, we don't think it's going to let us make a mistake. So as you see here, yeah, the total will populate down to the bottom, if you can't see that, it will populate as you put in your individuals and
Nice.
and what the amount would be based on what your HR folks say you have to put in. Fringe benefits are the same. We need to understand how the formulas are calculated. You usually have HR folks to help you with that so that we can understand the math. So again, the fringe benefits will calculate here automatically. You know that $1,500 is already allocated, will already be allocated for travel to our institutes. Being across in July will be somewhere in the Orlando area. And so, but you have other travel to think about. You have local travel that you may go around to see your students in those work-based experiences. You may have travel that is related to recruitment that you want to think about, as well as professional development. So keep those in mind. Because we have that, that is the one figure of the 1,500 that we so far think you might need for travel outside of what we cover for all of the institutes. We've seen such a range of supplies. What do you need in order to move your program forward in their implementation? What is that? Whether it's paper, pencil, you need in your copy machine. Is it technology that you need for additional personnel, for your job coaches, for monitoring processes? It's a broad area, both when we think of supplies and we think of equipment. We don't want to build a new building. We don't want to buy a car. So scratch that if you were thinking of it because of the inflation of cars now. But as you look at your supplies and you look at your equipment, what do you need that you don't have to help your program move forward? Some people have thought about things that maybe peer mentors need that's not covered in your scholarship. Maybe the students need that's not covered in the scholarships. It's depending on the expenses of your institution. But what are some of the other costs that you will need to make sure that the implementation of the program goes as fully as you can expect? We saw several grants had consultants helping them with different things. Whether you'll have those in your grant, again, you have to think about what the cost is, and you're looking over 1, 2, 3 years. Some people had expenses in the first year that were gone by the third year. And so that's what you have to think about. What do you need to load up front, and how does that pan out over the 3 years? And not only that, what does your institution provide for support, but the extra money that you will need to kind of help with that? You see some examples we have here that the other category, it may be for staff training. You may be really looking at faculty and staff focus domain, and you really want to put on some workshops in really helping the institution embrace this program and being creative in finding ways in which they can support the program. And so you may need to call in consultants to help you, or have resources to pay for that may be outside of your professional development division within your institution. So some ideas to put here that help you think about what else do we need or we could benefit from in implementation of that program. We do have a limit on our F&A costs, and so when we look at that, it will not exceed 10%, and so your institutions know that. And so as we look at all of the benefits, look at your fringe, look at your costs for each personnel, all of this math is done in Excel, in FCSUA.
The system will, regarding the F&A cost, it will actually not allow you to go over 10. So if for some reason a user enters more than 10, it will tell you. There will be a message to describe that.
And can't do it. So again, when you look at what you have throughout each year, it will be laid out because you think about each year, year 1, 2, 3, repeating what's needed. And at the end, an Excel file will be created that has your total budget amount, which those figures will load in. What you have now, for those of you who are existing programs, you have a column with that total budget and all of that. It will look like that as well, but it is automatically calculated, just like you've been doing on your Excel files.
Something else that this form has, and I do like a lot, is the fact that it actually catches how much, so if you say that your project is 2 years, so you're gonna see the space to work on 2-year budget. But if your program, if you wanna go 3 years, then you will see year 1, year 2, and year 3. So you will only see what the space that you need to work on your budget. So you will not have, it's not like the spreadsheet that you have all those columns available, even if you're not using it. So it's specific to what you need.
Yes.
So if you go 3.5, which like we have those cases, they will open a 4th area for you to be able to enter that piece of that time frame and enter your budget related to that. So it's dynamic.
Yes. And this example, you have year 2, and then it goes down to
only 2 years,
the total budget,
and then the total. So that section always there as a compilation of what's happened across all the terms.
Okay. Now, this must be completed. Sorry, I was thinking I was taking a shortcut instead of scrolling all the way back up.
Yeah.
But
you have to open back in edit mode.
Oh, thank you, Claudia. Peace. Okay, so the budget, like the logic model, the budget has to be done before you can do the budget justification. Because the budget justification is going to pull in the numbers and information that you had from the budget. Previously, you had separate documents, you had to copy and paste and put that information in there. Now the total amounts are there. What'll be needed in the budget justification is just that. And of course, you probably will lift some of the language, particularly with the personnel, that you have from your narrative that you'll put in here, but really being specific to help us see the calculation of such so that we can understand it, because in the budget itself, you will not be able to put that level of narrative there, but in the justification you will. And if it's an expansion from what you had in the narrative, that'd be great. I think each one you'll see as we move through, each one has pulled the total amount from the budget, and then what's left is your justification. And for each one of these areas that you have to justify. And again, in here, a lot of times we ask for, help us with the calculation if you didn't do it over in the budget. If you're using 10 mentors for 4 students at $15 an hour during the first year and not the second year, show us that, because you weren't able to do that in the budget itself. But here, you would be able to do that. And all of that together comes together as one nice grant proposal. Any references you had in your narrative will be found under additional documents. And so here is where you upload those references. So you will create a reference page with that. Will probably be the only one that's not, you'll have your citations within your narrative, but here is where you create a Word document and upload your references separately, and it'll be added to the proposal.
And it is required.
Yes.
That's something we have to mention. So it is required. So you're not going to be able to click on any of those actions except for the save, of course, but you will not be able to submit in any capacity unless you have the reference uploaded into the community.
Other documents we've had programs include letters of support. Or if it's an emphasis on a certain part in your narrative that shows statistical information that you want us to see, that you think would be important in the credibility of your proposal. And so that would clearly explain it better. Those are where you can upload additional documents if needed. When you're ready, like Claudia said, as you look at all of the submission process, it's not going to change with the save, the submit the draft to get feedback and submit for FCSUA approval. We do that back and forth. We do want to emphasize again, if you are looking at having a program budget of $500,000 a year for 3 years, that we will prioritize those. That means as you and I look through your proposal, we'll look at those programs that have a large number of students, those programs that include a residential component, and those programs that have multiple sites. Those justify $500,000 a year. We wish it could be more, but at the time, that's it. $500,000 a year for 3 years. So priority would go to those institutions like that. And so keep that in mind as you're thinking about it, what your particular, who might be at the upper end when we start thinking about issuing those. I also want to remind you that that is now open for, if there were any of you, I mentioned, I think at the mid-year, but I mentioned that if you are looking at budget modifications, you've already seen it, you need to make adjustments. And we don't find that to be the case for most of you, but if you did need to do budget adjustments, that applies now with the $500,000 limit per year. So I want you to keep that in mind as we go throughout the year, but more importantly, keep it in mind as we look at your next award. Miss anything?
You mentioned the new one, the new components.
Yeah. So if there's nothing in here right now, okay. Back to sharing. Looking at some of our new things again.
That's it.
I got it in present mode. Janice, thank you. We'll look at new stuff here. There. That's better. There we go. Okay, and next slide. So again, the funding cycle, something for you to keep in mind as you are writing through. For those of you, if you've not started in up for continuing grant, we will be reaching out to you after the FLPEPPI. Same for your renewal application. We'll get focused on helping with that and move forward with that. I think we want to go to our next steps. And we are excited, which I mentioned at the beginning of the morning workshop, but we are fastly approaching for everything to be in the FCSUA community at a click of the finger. Want to talk about this, Claudia?
Yeah. So this that we just showed you is just the beginning of just bringing all that is related, all that you do related, and we do related to grants into the FCSUA community. We realize that once we transfer the grant proposal into the community, it will be disconnected from you doing your annual and final performance reports or sending your quarterly invoices and summary of activities, or maybe requesting a change to your budget or a modification. So we kind of assessed all the situation and said, well, let's go ahead and do it. Let's go ahead and put all those missing components also in the community. I think those are the last ones. So I don't think after that will be anything else done in paper anymore. So that's what we're doing right now. That's what we're working on right now. So the grant proposal is only the beginning of this work. It's the most recent addition to the community, but definitely all of this is coming. Of course, with notifications, with reminders, in a way just to keep track and keep the data clean for us, but also for you, because everything will be connected. Especially, we put a lot of effort into the logic model and the evaluation plan that you saw on those tabs, because they are related 100% to what you report on your annual and your final performance report. But also when you do your summary of activities, we kind of round that to look similar to what you were doing in your annual and final reports. So it's all similar, and you're used to a format that it makes it more easier for you to report on what you're doing and where the programs are going. So that we are excited about bringing all that into the FCSU community. It's going to be a lot, but we're definitely going to help you to navigate through it, and we will do as many trainings as necessary. And for the grant proposal, so as I said, it's our newest component. So the few programs that are using it, we have received very good feedback. We might find things here and there. Something that I want to mention that we actually realized on the proposal narrative, those formats, tools that you see on those boxes, we found one that is not actually performing as we thought it was going to be. And it's a glitch that we found on Salesforce, and we actually found that thanks to Christian's development.
Yeah.
So he actually mentioned that. He said, "This is happening, and how is this happening? We're right now in the process of correcting that." So anything that you let us know that is not working as you think it should, it's always beneficial. So please share that information. It's always to make it better for you and for us. And if you have any questions, please just unmute yourself, share it on the chat.
Okay. Well, we hope you were able to get into and follow along with us in the community and see if there was anything that we were sharing that were very different and made the maneuvering odd. You know, we're here to help in any way, providing one-on-one assistance as you need it. And again, those who we know are up for continuing grant and program renewal, Drew and I'll be reaching out to you soon after the FLPEPPI to make sure you're on the right track so that we can get everything in and done by June 30th of next year. Stop sharing. Well, then we'll see you in a little while. We have a welcome that we're excited about. Which will be coming up within about an hour and a few minutes. And so we kick off our FLPEPPI that way, and then we will keep rolling until Friday after our post workshop. Thank you so much. If you have feedback that you want to share via email, if you haven't already done that, please share it with us. Let us know. You are our eyes for everything that we do, and it's important that we take care of whatever it is that you need. We look forward to seeing you soon. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.